fallacies of the faith.
Hello and welcome to another episode of my Theistic Pearls of Wisdom series, where I choose posts and comments theists make on Facebook and respond to them from an atheistic, naturalistic, and obviously my own personal perspective. Where to begin with this? There is so much wrong from the outset that it is hard to know. So let me read to you this latest pearl and then jump into deconstructing it. To atheists. Your claim is not agnosticism, so your creed thus includes some kind of knowledge. How exactly is this different from religious faith? From a perspective of pure logic, we have both made assumptions. Mine is that the world has not been in the grip of mass psychosis for thousands of years. Yours, apparently, that no force exists that has not been identified and measured. Much as our ancestors struggled to put to language their experience with the ineffable, so too do we try to understand the world with the available evidence. Mine may be just another anecdote, but I would be in jeopardy of outer darkness if I were to now deny the Lord after the abundance of evidences He has provided me. Topic: why is atheism not classified as a religious belief? Furthermore, how did separation of church and state become state-sponsored atheism? It strikes me strange that the poster starts with telling atheists what their position is, when they clearly do not even understand the differences between theism, atheism, and agnosticism, and are unaware that a knowledge claim and a belief position are not mutually exclusive, since knowledge is in general seen as a subset of belief. Knowledge is basically a belief for which it would take worldview-changing new information to demonstrate it is wrong. Theism and atheism are statements about a belief the person holds. Agnostic and its antonym gnostic are statements about knowledge. The theist believes a God exists. Most of them would admit that they do not know with certainty because they are basically proud to rely on faith instead of knowledge. Even though there are agnostic theists, especially presuppositionalists, who are convinced God revealed itself to them through scripture, and based on that they claim 100% certainty in the belief, a contradiction in terms, if you'd ask me. It is actually a little more complicated with atheists, since there is a common understanding and a philosophical understanding of the position. Let us start with the philosophical one, because it is the more extreme, where atheism is seen as the absolute claim that no God does exist. But since such a position would take on a burden of proof that can and does not have to be met, it is actually a position seldom taken by those who label themselves atheists. Some who take this strong atheist position base it on the fact that they have not been presented with a logically coherent definition of any God, and hence all gods presented cannot exist. But why take on a burden of proof towards something that has never actually been shown to exist, when the position, I am not convinced that any God does exist because you, the theist, have not fulfilled your burden of proof, is absolutely justified and easy to defend? Why run when you can stroll? So, neither theist nor atheist are making a knowledge claim as the default, and hence they both can be seen as agnostic. I personally can take agnostic position towards a particular God claim. I am agnostic atheist towards the Abrahamic God version because I deem the Abrahamic God as described to be logically incoherent and self-contradicting. Since A cannot be not A at the same time, this God can, as described, not exist, and yes, I am convinced of that. So, the first statement of this post, your claim is not agnosticism, so your creed thus includes some kind of knowledge, is rubbish, because atheism, as commonly understood, makes no knowledge claim. But it gets even worse, because it assumes that atheism has a creed. What would that be? Or does this poster actually not even understand what creed means? That is a distinct possibility. How is this different from religious faith? This is a question that comes up quite often. The amusing thing is that it actually betrays much more about the one who asks it than that it points to a problem with atheism, because it points to the realization that faith is nothing positive, that it is not a virtue. Why else would they accuse atheism and atheists to rely on faith? But the accusation is just rubbish anyway. It does not take faith to say, I am not convinced by your proposition that your God exists, because you have not met your burden of proof. Not being convinced is in no way equal to having faith. It does not take belief to not be convinced. All this again is based on the assumption that atheism makes the counterclaim to theism, when all it does is stating, I do not think your statement is true because you have not shown it to be true. That position does not entail the claim that the statement is not true or that it is false. If you say, I can fly, and I say, prove it, I have not said that it is impossible for you to fly, especially since flying can, stated like that, without further context, mean several things. Does it mean that you personally can take off and fly through the air? Or are you saying that you can fly a plane because you are a licensed pilot? Or is it that you simply have bought a plane ticket and now can fly to where you need to go instead of taking a train? All I want is for you to demonstrate that your claim that you can fly is true. From a perspective of logic, we have both made assumptions. I have to wonder what logic the poster is applying here, but the statement is clearly wrong. I have not made any assumptions about the claim itself. I'm just pointing out that the assumption and assertion that a God exists is not being supported. Mine is that the world has not been in the grip of mass psychosis for thousands of years. Again, I wonder how the poster comes to such an assumption. How would they know that it is impossible for humanity to have been the victim of mass psychosis for thousands of years? The poster just engages in an ad populum fallacy, saying that billions of people who have believed in God, completely overlooking, by the way, that they did not believe in the same God or gods, cannot have been wrong. As if his assertion is evidence or justification for anything. But now they want to tell me what assumptions I am making. Yours apparently that no force exists that has not been identified and measured. Nice that they are putting a qualifier in there, but if you are wrong, you are wrong, and the qualifier does not help that at all. A force that cannot be identified, measured, or detected in any verifiable way might exist, but it is indistinguishable from one that does in fact not exist. What they did here is a nice bait and switch, because now they are talking about a force or forces, not a God entity. A force, even if we have not detected it yet, can have completely naturalistic origins. It does not have to be anything supernatural. No entity with intelligence and intent that cares about humanity and the universe. So suddenly, in the view of the poster, atheists reject anything that is beyond our ability to detect right now, which is not the case. Anyone who thinks that way should look up the difference between philosophical and methodological naturalism. Much as our ancestors struggled to put to language their experience with the ineffable, So to do, we try to understand the world with the available evidence. Experience with the ineffable? I'm sorry, but do you know what this guy is talking about? In general, I do not deny the experiences a person had and is telling me about. What I reject are the unfounded conclusions made based on these experiences. And the choice of words clearly demonstrates the presumption that the experience actually points to something outside of the natural world. A presumption that I cannot share, because there is no method that would grant us access to the ineffable. Hence, it is beyond our ability to examine and cannot be appealed to as the cause for anything. And yes, we attempt to understand the world based on the evidence available. But that means again that nothing points to something outside of this world, and if there are experiences we do not understand, we have to admit that and not make up explanations not in evidence. Mine may be just another anecdote, but I would be in jeopardy of utter darkness if I were to now deny the Lord after the abundance of evidences he has provided me. Yes, all they do have is another anecdote. And seriously, whose fault would it be if they would find themselves in utter darkness, and who asks them to deny the Lord in the first place? The poster does not get that at most I am denying their unsupported claims. Even though I surely have and will do so again when challenged, rejected, denied, and blasphemed the Holy Spirit, which is the one unforgivable sin according to the Gospel of Matthew 12:31, nobody asked the poster to do the same. The poster claims to have been provided with abundant evidence, but completely fails to present anything to me to examine. After a rambling and completely aimless post, this pearl ends with this topic: why is atheism not classified as religious belief? Furthermore, how did separation of church and state become state-sponsored atheism? Only because posts need to have a topic of discussion, and these questions have nothing to do with what he said before. What is one to do with this? I am not living in the USA, and I'm quite certain the poster does not either. But these questions only relate to the USA, where the separation of church and state is a major constitutional topic, and this poster is repeating right-wing talking points, even if they are disguised as questions. So, as far as I know, atheism is, in the US, classified as a religion under the law, and it falls under that protection. Nobody should be discriminated against because they are atheists. But I assume that is exactly not what the poster had in mind when they demand that atheism is classified as a religion. And about state-sponsored atheism, equality appears to the privileged like persecution, like something is taken away from them. Hidden under this is the grievance that the theory of evolution is taught in science class, but creationism and intelligent design are not, because the one is science backed by evidence, the others are not. And that pupils cannot be forced in public schools to participate in teacher-led prayers anymore. What would the poster say if the prayer is not Christian but Hindu or Muslim? Would they still want it to be forced on the pupils? Why is it that these believers do not understand that the separation of religion and government protects them as well? Another thing surely is that gays are now allowed to marry, and the trans rights are a topic of vehement discussion, but I am guessing right now. I wonder what the poster would respond if I challenged them to bring examples for this state-sponsored atheism, but I guess they would just fall silent. I kind of had hoped that this would go in a different direction, but what can one do when this is all one has to work with? Some examples of evidence that convinced them that their God is real, or at least a definition would have been nice. But as you have seen, they have presented nothing. So this is all I can squeeze out of this particular pearl. I hope you enjoyed this episode and will join me again the next time on this channel. Enjoy this life. It's the only chance we get as far as we can tell. See you soon.
I heard it all before. Is that all you have in store? Is there really nothing more than just fallacies and faith?